Amazing, shout out. All right, guys. Y'all ready to jump in? All right, let's do it.
Yeah.
Well, I bring to you the beautiful, smart, funny, arguably the second or third funniest person on our team, depending on who you ask.
I won't even fight for number one spot. Definitely not.
But guys, shout out to Aaron Diamond.
Do I have a clicker or do I just hit the
Clicker.
thing?
You know, I don't know if we ever got a clicker. It's a good question.
That's okay. I can just.
Yeah, cool. I'll get one though.
All right. Well, you guys set me up nicely for this talk. I loved how many just team wins and team failures we talked about, because the reality is, if you want to get to a certain level, you grow the people who grow the business, right? We can't do it alone. And boy, have I tried and I failed and I've tried and I failed. And this has been like the number one thing in business that has made me question so many times, should I just give up? Like, am I just meant to do this job myself? Like, can I not bring in someone to do this thing? So I'm talking to you today about how to recruit and retain A players who care about your business as much as you do. And you will hear people say, nobody will care about your business as much as you do. I completely disagree. I think really bad leaders say that. I think people who don't know the things I'm going to talk about today and aren't willing to grow into that type of leader say things like that. I definitely have people on our team who probably care about IFCA even more than I do some days, given the day. And so it's absolutely possible. And the thing is, though, I think sometimes we confuse and we think, well, they don't make the decision exactly like I would. Well, usually they just don't have the context, right? And then that comes down to your communication skills to bring them up on the context. But if you implement what I'm talking about today, my promise to you is, if you are in a phase where you are recruiting, interviewing, looking for these people, you will attract the right people if you do what I'm going to talk about today. Or if you're in a phase where you feel like, we have some good people on our team, but I don't want them looking around for another opportunity. I don't want them leaving. I will give you the tools today to really help empower those people so they have everything that they want inside your organization. And why am I qualified to talk about this? Because I've messed it up a lot. You know what was interesting? As I was going through this talk, I might have too many personal stories in here, because every single one, I'm like, oh, I made a mistake doing this, and I made a mistake doing that. But after hiring probably 50 plus people at this point and making a lot of costly mistakes, I'm really, really excited to share those with you and share the lessons that we've learned. So like I said, if you are in the position where you are thinking about hiring, or if you're in the position where you've already scaled a business, listen up today. This is going to be extremely useful. It's a talk that I wish I had 6 years ago. All right, so let's start with recruiting. We'll divide into like recruiting and getting the people, and then retaining the people. And so let's start with how not to recruit people. Automations are going to be weird, but that's cool. Proximity hires, right? Anyone know what a proximity hire is when I say that? It's basically like, oh, you're my cousin and you need a job, so you should do this job for me. Or it's also, I think this one's a little more sneaky, it's the people who slide in your DMs. I have an agency and I place DM setters. Well, that's still a proximity hire, right? They came to you. It doesn't mean they're the best option to have that person inside of your company. And so often we do this because we're intimidated by the process. We don't understand really how else to do it. This person's right here. It's meant to be, manifestation, a sign from God. I should just do it. It's really just like laziness. It's like, okay, this person's here. Do not do that. Not interviewing enough people. I'll elaborate on this one. Ignoring red flags. I also talk throughout my speech about how to see and identify and like litmus tests for red flags, because I don't think any of us see a red flag and go, I know that's gonna really bite me in the ass in 90 days, but I'm just gonna go ahead and do it anyway. But so often we do. And then not being very specific in your criteria for the role. We make the mistakes in hiring people because we don't even know what we want half the time, right? And so I'm gonna start with this one. We'll go through, we'll talk about how to get hyper specific, and that's 80% of it. From there, you build your interview questions. From there, you really narrow things down. So, being specific in your criteria for the role. Some of you may know this, some of you may not. Once upon a time, I was married previously. And I chose that partner. Talk about a proximity hire. I'm not even kidding. He was my next door neighbor. I was in college sorority and he was my next door neighbor. And so my criteria was this guy's there and he's cute. And so we started dating. I was 20. Life goes on. You get to that point where like a lot of your friends are getting married and I'm like, he's here. He's right here, proximity, and he's cute. Okay, should get married. And so we did, and that marriage was a disaster, and it lasted exactly 2 years. And then, people, when you divorce, people are like, what happened? I'm like, I just married the wrong person. We just were incompatible, and we just didn't know how to choose a partner, right? And so often we choose people in our business like that. It's the exact same thing when you just go in blind. I have no idea what I'm looking for. I'm young, whatever, you're here. And so I told myself, I'll never, ever, ever get married again. Such a terrible experience, 60 grand in attorney fees, arguments, all the things. I'm just like good on my own. I have my career, I know what I want to do, I have great friends, I have great family, and this was like my life mission. And then I kind of said, I'd love to be a mom, I'd love to have a partner, but I'm not going to lower my standards. Like I created a list that I will share with you, my exact list. I created a list and said, if I can find a person who meets this criteria, I will do this again. And so something that I say often when we are hiring for roles in our company, it's not the best we have, right? We could get 100 people to apply and someone might say, well, this is the best applicant we have. I don't care if it's the best we have. It's not the best we need. And so that was my marriage criteria. The best that I need, the option is never, ever, ever do it, or the best that I need. And the best that I needed looked like this. So you guys can, and this is only half the list. You guys can judge the hell out of me right now. I do not care. Number one thing on the list is I was like, this person needs to be rich. They need to be wealthy because I am going to be rich. I'm going to be wealthy. And in my first marriage, I was the breadwinner. I was the one pulling the weight. It was really misbalanced based off of that. I thought I could make it work, and it just did not work for us because then I was hyper-masculine. He was intimidated. It affected everything. And I said, well, okay, if this person doesn't check this box, then I'm not doing it. They need to be fun. They need to be able to have a good time. One of my favorite stories to tell about Jordan and I is when I met him, he was in a contest prep and he was so boring. And I'm like, this guy, he's super smart and I'll hang out with him and I'll learn from him and like, we'll be really good friends, but there's no way like this is going anywhere. And the day after he finished his contest prep, we like went out, day drinking, had such a great day. We're so carefree. And I was like, okay, I might be in love with this guy. That was like the final box that I needed to check. Great in bed. When I was feeling really confident when I wrote this, now I'm a little like shy about it up in front of the room. So I want to elaborate on that one. But it was a criteria. I was like, sex is pretty big part of my life. Wanted children or the potential to be a great dad because you don't know, right? And this was another, like when I tell you this was my list and like as we're going on dates, going through the motions, I'm like, check or like, no. I remember Jordan and I were having a conversation. We'd been dating probably 3 months at this point, and I was talking about like wanting to have kids one day, and he goes, oh, I've always told myself I was never gonna have kids, and I just like, damn, like I was like penciling across the line on my list, and I said to him, well, that's fine, like I don't want to have kids now, so we will date and then we will break up and then I will find a partner who wants to have kids, and I kid you not, I said it just like that. And he was just like, are you kidding me? Like, not at all. Done this before, a very specific criteria. And the next morning he woke up and he was like, okay, have my babies. And I'm like, okay, cool, we can do this. Values travel as much as I do, extremely important to me. Physically attractive, not predictable, and boy, I wish I would have been like a little bit more specific on my criteria there, because not predictable. Like Jordan is the least predictable, stressful person I've ever met in my whole life, but I got exactly what I wanted. Open-minded, excellent communicator, apologizes when he's wrong, and open to feedback. So I came with this very specific list. This person needs to meet all these things, or I'm not doing this. Do we hire people in our business like that? Do we sit down? And I mean, this took me probably a year to create. Because I kept thinking, what do I hate? What's the opposite of that? Okay, this, don't settle, put it on there. If you don't find anyone, it's okay. And this is the mindset that we need to go into every single hire for, or we're gonna shoot and we're gonna miss. We're gonna like get 90 days in, we're gonna get 6 months in, get a year in and be like, wish I would have been a little bit more specific on this thing, or I wish I would have thought about that thing. So when it comes to hiring and recruiting the right people, all of this is done in the prep work. All of this is done before you hop on the interview and start asking questions. So most of this really does fall on you. So that's 80% of the importance of the speech. If you remember anything, remember that part. I'm gonna give you some really tactical ways to do that, like by role and examples, and okay, how do I formulate questions to know if this person meets that? But let's start at the top. Let's start about like, okay, now I know what I want. How do I get leads and attract people to get to the thing that I want? Well, it's no different than getting leads for your business, really. So I don't want to talk to you up here about like everything we have in our modules, right? Because we set up for you like, how do you recruit for a VA? How do you recruit for a setter? How do you recruit for a closer? How do you recruit for an assistant coach? And so if you are in a position where you're looking for that specific person, how do I market for it? How do I get leads? We have all the exact templates, all that stuff. I don't want to talk about that up here today because you guys have all of those resources. But what I will talk about is a little more like ways for you to think critically. Because I think it's so important for you guys to have the tools, have the modules, and a lot of it is like, yeah, proof is in the pudding, success is there, do what we say and just like repeat it. But it's not a bad thing ever to be like, well, how do you know this and why? And that's what I'm trying to let you inside of my brain today of how do you come up with those things? Because the more you can think outside of the box, the better, right? And so, and this is also too, like level 2. I love what you said about a lot of the people that are on your team now came from your network. And that's a place I don't think we specifically talk about that, like in our modules, like go out and source your network. You can find a lot of really great people from your network because there's that transference of trust and character. And like when you meet a new friend, it's like, oh, well, if you like them, I'm gonna like them. If my best friend is best friends with them, I'm gonna be best friends with them. Oftentimes that's the case. So, as you're thinking and you're marketing and you're casting your net, who in your network might know someone, especially as you start hiring for higher positions within the company. Like the last position we hired someone right into like our leadership team. And the only place I interviewed from was my network. Well, that's not true. The only place I had success interviewing from was my network. Had 600 LinkedIn applications and just DQ'd every single one of them. But inside of our network, people knew people. Job boards, we talk about that in the modules. Here's something though that a mentor said this to me a couple years ago, and it was kind of a moment where I was like, you can do that? But actually outbound recruiting, right? How do we get leads in our business? Well, we get inbound and we get outbound. If you think someone's a good fit for the job, or even some of the best people for the role have jobs, they're not sitting around waiting on an opportunity to come to them. You can poach, you can reach out to me. Now watch, everyone in this room is gonna be doing it, like stealing each other's assistant coaches. But you can,
just not our team.
Yeah, not our team, not each other's. You can though, right? You can present an opportunity to someone just like you would to become a client if they fit the criteria. And then how else, right? Competitive compensation. And obviously, in our modules, we talk about industry standard for this role is this, and this role is this. And you can always come to us and we will help you. We will, share with you what we think. But a couple of really good resources and tools to do this on your own: PayScale and Salary.com. So what these are essentially like what companies are, or no, I always get the two confused. Let me remind myself real fast. Oh no, these two are like what's standard to pay. So basically you put in like where you live, is it a remote job, hours per week, the actual title, all those things, and it spits out, okay, this is what's standard. Glassdoor is basically like word on the street. So people submit their salaries. And so it's like, this is what people are saying should be paid. This is what people are saying they actually are paid. And you can look at these two tools to know how competitive you are and go, okay, well, I want to be 10 to 15% above that because I don't offer, benefits. It's not a W-2 job or whatever. But what you do offer is the ability to work from home, freedom, flexibility. People really value that. So you look at these and you can kind of decide from there. These are also really incredible resources for people on your team. I share this information with people on our team because it's like, know what you're worth in the marketplace, and if you have skills in this area, like this is how they can come and like leverage a raise and things like that. All right, so how then do you know what you're looking for, right? I talked about my very specific list and criteria. I talked about, all right, so this is what you need, get leads to that. And so I want to break it down simply, and then I want to show you some examples, and I want to, by the end, I'll show you a whole rubric of like how to put this together. So simply put, what are you looking for? 3 things. You're looking for character, competence, and commitment. And so what do these 3 things mean? So what I've learned about character is it's not what someone says, but it's how they act. Because behavior, how someone actually acts, really shows the proxy to what their values are and their true character. Because I'll probably say this 15 times throughout the rest of the presentation, it's an interview. They're gonna impress you. They're gonna say the right thing. They're probably even gonna BS you, right? So you have to be a really good interviewer to be able to decide, all right, does this person's character align with my character? How do we even know what our character is? Our character and our company character, even more importantly, usually they're the same, but your company kind of takes on a shape of its own, come from our core values. And so you assess, all right, does this person have the character? They might actually have great character. They just might not have the character for your company, right? So what are my company core values? Does this person align with them? Let me tell you about the first time that I realized I did not know how to interview for this at all. So this was back when I owned the online fitness coaching company, and I started getting so many complaints from one particular coach. There were like 4 in a week, and people were just like shooting them in my DMs. Hey, I don't want to be annoying, but like, my coach, I won't say her name obviously, but my coach, she really is just like really hard on me. I feel like she's rude sometimes. I'm trying really hard, but she comes back like this. She's kind of cold, yada, yada, yada. And I'm like, well, let me just see the conversation if you don't mind. I would send screenshots, and I'm like, wow. I can't believe I have to like tell somebody not to talk to someone like this. It was very much like, well, if you're not gonna do what I told you to do, I can't even help you, right? 0 empathy, 0 coaching. And I'm just like, I really missed the mark on this person. I didn't even know I had to tell someone, hey, you have to be nice and empathetic to your clients. But what did that tell me was this person did not have the value of authentic connection, which is a company core value of ours. And I didn't do a single thing in the interview process to assess. You know why I hired her? I hired her because she was an extremely skilled RD. Probably the most skilled technical person I had ever hired. She could do any advanced healing, gut, thyroid, hormone protocol. And I was like, she has all the experience. She's so smart, box checked, hired, right? And what I learned from that is it's so much easier to teach the hard skills, the technical skills, than it is to teach someone how to be empathetic. You have a hard time teaching character. So when I show you guys like, oh, okay, these are all like the things you want to think about, the boxes to check, you're gonna weight character more heavily, because if someone's a 1 out of 5 on this core value, they're not gonna get to a 4 out of 5. They're not gonna get to a 5 out of 5. There's just a mismatch in character there.
She's from the south side of Chicago.
That's basically what I just said. All right, so I think sometimes core values, especially when we're starting, we made this mistake. It's just like, we need core values, okay, obviously that's what companies do. Here are my core values, write them down. But like, we don't believe in them, we don't use them. And so you will see, if you kind of think about your core values that way, you will see a fracture in character of people that you're hiring because you're not sure on what you want, right? So first, write down your core values. If you really haven't done this, if you haven't put a lot of thought into the exercise of like, man, what do I people on my team to stand for. Do that. And then you have to use the interview process to assess the values, right? And so you have to ask questions that test to ensure that the person has demonstrated behavior. You always want a story recall. You always want something that they have done, because it's like, prove it. Show it to me. You can say anything, and of course you're going to say the best possible thing right now, right? So you want to formulate interview questions that have demonstrated that the person has done this behavior in the past that aligns with your value. Here's another one that I royally messed up on a core value. We hired someone, this was just earlier this year too. We hired somebody and I started giving him feedback, very normal, constructive feedback around, things in his role, all in an attempt to help him grow, help him be a great leader. And I kid you not, he would either ignore it entirely. Like if I would send it in a voice memo, I would have to ask 2 times, hey, bumping this up. Like, I'm trying to help you, will you respond to me? Or if we were on a phone call, he would just kind of deflect and ignore me. Or he would get incredibly defensive and be explaining to me like why he did it his way and just could not hear the feedback I was giving him. And I'm like, man, how did I miss this? Well, this person does not value relentless growth, which is a core value of our company. If you are relentlessly looking to grow, you love and welcome that feedback. And so I said, okay, going back to the drawing board, I didn't ask very good questions around relentless growth. What could be some questions I could ask about relentless growth when I'm like doing my next hire and replacing him? And so going in, then I formulated following questions. I said, to every next person I interviewed, I started asking them, who's the last person who gave you feedback? Because we're relying on behavior, right? Who's the last person who gave you feedback? What was that feedback? Who's the last person who gave you constructive feedback? What was that feedback? Who was the second to last person who gave you constructive feedback? What was that feedback? Who else gives you constructive feedback? What's been the hardest constructive feedback you've ever had to take in your life? And I'm not like interrogation style firing them off like that, but in a very conversational way, asking so this person can't like just BS me, right? Be like, well, one time so-and-so said, really digging in and being able to tell. And on some of those interviews, I could tell we were like going in like a BS direction, or that the person really had never had a leader to give them feedback. And so what I realized in kind of those situations is like, okay, I'm not giving up on this person just because they've never had a leader to give them feedback. I'll switch and I'll do some like situational or I'll do some like on the fly test here and see if I can give people feedback, which we'll talk about that in a minute. But man, you really have to go, okay, what is the core value and how do I like make certain that I'm asking enough questions so that they can show me with their behavior they have this thing. All right, to kind of wrap up on character here, there's no cheating this system. And I think it was Arthur who kind of reminded me last night, like my last couple of talks, and I'm like, man, every talk I feel like I've ever given at one of these events is about becoming a better version of yourself to be a better leader. And that's the like thesis of character. You're not going to attract people who have core values stronger than you have your own core values. Because people on your team, they're signing up to be mentored by you essentially, right? I know in the job postings we say, hey, this isn't a mentorship, blah, blah, blah. What we mean is like, don't come in here, learn from me, bounce and take it to another company or like go do your own thing, but it is a mentorship. People are coming in, one of the biggest advantages that they get is being in proximity to you and learning from you, especially your character. So if you feel like this person on my team isn't doing this, that like maybe the feedback example resonated with you, right? It's like, they just don't seem very growth oriented. Well, how do you give feedback? How often do you give feedback? What does it look like when you receive feedback, right? Are you displaying these things to a degree that's almost like exaggerating them so that they know what the example really looks like? Because people, they will not grow beyond you in that way. All right, so competence. What I've learned about competence is that experience in a role has nothing to do with the person being competent. You don't hire people because they have experience. You hire people because they have a skill. And in an ideal world, it would make sense, that, okay, they had this experience, which meant they had the skills to have the experience, right? No. In my experience, I have not seen that to be true. And so once upon a time, I hired a guy for a sales manager position, and his resume looked awesome. And it made me bypass everything I was supposed to do because I was so blinded by it. I was like, look at all this experience. Of course he's gonna be great. He was the #3 employee at Gym Launch. This doesn't leave this room, by the way. He was the #3 employee at Gym Launch, did $50 million in sales for them, went on to go to another company where he was the manager of, I think his resume said like a team of 30 setters and closers, and he's coming in for a sales manager role. I'm like, this is unbelievable. This is everything I could ever want. And so I asked him no skills questions. I asked him really I didn't really ask him anything I was supposed to ask him. I was just kind of like, here's how we run our business. What would you do? Like, very friendly conversation. Jordan was even more blinded than I was. He got on this interview and I'm like, he didn't even talk. You just like basically told him how to do the job the whole time. We were just like enamored by this guy. And he gets like 2 months into the role and I can tell he has no freaking idea what he's doing. Even reviewing his sales calls, I'm like, how did you close $50 million in sales at Gym Launch? And I later found out how he had the experience without the skills, which that's a story for another day. But I started asking him the questions that I really wish I would have asked in the interview, the actual skills questions. I started saying, okay, so when you worked at this company and you ran into this problem with your setters, what did you do? Oh, I don't know. Well, and then I just started making them simpler and simpler. How are your setters compensated? I don't know. How are the closers compensated? I'm not sure. I'd have to go back and okay, so you ran this department, but you have no idea anything about it. Okay, so skills questions. Do not get blinded by experience. And just that lesson and that hire, he was a high salaried individual. I also paid a recruitment agency to help me find him. Also the lost revenue from the company, that was about a $170,000 mistake in the 3 months that I brought this person in, just because I was like, yeah, he's gonna be great, he's gonna be awesome. So when I tell you, go through the process, it's so important at every single level that you're hiring for.
The close rate was like 35% as well.
Yeah, experience does not mean shit. All right, so that's how you don't know if someone is competent. But you're like, okay, so I don't rely on their experience. I look at their skills, but like how do I know if someone is competent or not? There's 2 ways you can do it. One, competency testing. I'll dive into both of these and tell you what they are. Well, I guess I'm telling you right now. Competency testing is a skill test through role play, right? We'll get a little more into it. Or situational referencing. Situational referencing is, like I've said a couple of times, asking them to refer to a situation from their past where they've done the thing. So let's dive into that a little bit. So competency testing, what could that look like? And I'm sure a lot of you guys have done this already. If you've hired a DM rep or if you've hired an assistant coach, like we teach this to do this. But I'll just give you a few examples of like an assistant coach so you can apply them. So if you're hiring an assistant coach, you can test them on things that you regularly deal with in this position. So managing an unhappy client who wants a refund, managing a client who, we all love this one, I'm not seeing results and I'm really upset about it. It's your guys' fault, but I'm just not doing anything you're telling me to do. Throw a client case their way that you know for a fact that they have no idea how they'll handle. Find out what their process is on getting resourceful. So you want to think, okay, what are the things that come up in this role and how do I test this person? And so sometimes people don't have experience. That's fine. I freaking love hiring people who don't have experience sometimes. If the character traits are there, I'm like, that's fine. I know the other stuff is easier to teach. And I can tell really quickly how quickly you're gonna learn by just doing stuff like this. So with each of these, it's a skills test. And so like that last one there, for an example, I love this one because it really does show how resourceful someone can get and how they think. And it shows a lot of character too, because if you throw a really complex case that you're like, all right, I don't even know how to fix this, so they're not gonna know how to fix it. Do they just kind of BS their way through it? Do they give a shit about the client? Are they honest? Like there's so many things that you get to kind of uncover when just testing someone like this. The other way, situational referencing. So like I said, this is where you ask someone to refer to a situation from their past. And a good example here, can you tell me about a time that a client came to you with something you had no idea about? How did you handle it? Same example as the competency test, but I'm saying, hey, when did you actually do this, right? Tell me about a time. Or can you tell me about a time a client came to you upset, wanting a refund? Same example, but tell me about a time that you've already done this. Tell me about the behavior, tell me about the experience, and then I can drill down on the skills. Tell me a story about a client that you took through, X protocol, something you guys do regularly in your coaching, and it can be a very, simple thing. It doesn't have to be a super complex thing. And how did you see it impact her life? And so with a question like this, you might have to drill down and rephrase it multiple times, because a question like this can be extremely powerful if you point them in the direction of like the answer you're trying to get. So word for word, this is very important here. Tell me a story. Here's the thing, people can't BS stories. So tell me about a story is a lot more impactful than tell me about a time. There's a big difference between, well, I'll just give you a personal example. I asked somebody, tell me 2 stories. Tell me 2 stories about 2 people that you've had a big impact on as their manager and as their leader. And a good manager, leader, person that I'm looking for in this role says, oh yeah, let me tell you about Sam Armando. It's a guy on our team, but just like thinking through him, and like if someone asked me that question, this is probably what I'd say. When he came into our sales team, he had no experience. He came in as a closer, he bombed. I mean, his numbers bombed. He had no confidence. It was showing up in all areas of his life, him as a dad and his marriage. And he was like really, really down on himself, like just beating himself up. And I actually demoted him. I demoted him to a setter, and I said, hey, you're gonna stay here. We're gonna work on some fundamental skills that you don't have. One of them being your ability to regulate yourself and just have a little more confidence. We brought those skills up. We really worked on his character. He got back to being a closer, and now he crushes it. Now he's always above 30%, right? They would tell you a story that's like, I did this. I feel so good about it. I impacted this person's life. So as an assistant coach, you ask that question. And if someone's like, yeah, I helped this like woman lose 30 pounds. Okay, cool story. do you really value authentic connection with your clients? You can sniff out like kind of a 2-for-1 here, right? The competency that they can do it, and then what is the character behind them doing it? I asked that same question to a lot of people that I disqualified in the interview process, because what you notice is tell me a story. When people kind of start to stumble, you can tell that they're BSing. And so tell me a story. And if the first question you get back is a question, then it's like, okay, you're nervous. Are you nervous because I've made you feel nervous in this interview, which we'll talk about how to eliminate that, or are you nervous because you're being put on the spot? And so I could tell when I would say, tell me a story, I'd be like, oh, a story about someone I've managed? Yeah, that's what I said. Like setters and closers, well, yeah, that's like what you're here to do. That's why you're on the interview. And then it was never a story. It was like, yeah, this person, they went from this, from that. Like they left out details, very ambiguous. So if you are hiring for experience, tell me a story, tell me a story, tell me a story. The nice thing though about situational referencing and competency testing is you can just switch. So if you go down a road of situational referencing and they're like, I'll be honest, I've never had to deal with that, which is a great answer, by the way, like so much better than them just BSing you, then just switch. Then just switch to competency testing. Okay, cool, great that you've never had a client, ask for a refund. Let's play it out. I'm the client, I want a refund. I'm this many weeks in the program, give some context. What would you say to me? And just see how they work on the fly from there. So zooming out here and how to really think about this with competency, I've thrown some examples at you, right? client wants a refund, client upset they're not getting results, all these different things. But it's really up to you in the role, like to zoom all the way out and say, all right, what are the 5 core things that this job actually does? And how am I going to evaluate those 5 things? Because it's going to be different at each of your companies, and only you really know, okay, this is what this person does. And so you write those down, and that's going to be a small part of the criteria that you choose, because remember, we also have character, we have competency. What was my third one? I'm about to click over the slide and we'll remember. Commitment, yes. I literally did forget. And so you're gonna draw like 5 things out of each of those. So it's really important, all right, well, what actually goes into this role? And then from there, that's how you come up with your interview questions, getting super, super clear on the criteria. I told Kevin I was going to do this, so I just remembered. Oftentimes, we make this mistake where we're just like, we just don't do any of this. And we do the proximity hire. We do what I said at the very beginning. And I was sitting in the coffee shop yesterday, and Jordan and Kevin were at the other table. And I was like, I feel like I have a really good example of this. And so, Maddie, I remember when you were hiring, this is probably a year ago at this point, and Kevin was like, hey, send me a doc of your specific criteria and like what you like about these people. And legit on one of the girls, it was like, she's really cute and I like her. Like talk about, I can give Maddie a shirt because she came on my open office. Yeah, right? She came on my open office the other day. I was asking really, really, really good questions, right? But when you're getting hyper specific, of your 5 core things that the job does, I just don't think she's cute and I really like her fit anywhere in that. But oftentimes it's what happens, we're human beings and we get blinded by likeness and we just find ourselves in a conversation and then you're just like, I don't know, we vibed. Should probably pay her to do some stuff. All right, commitment. You can have someone with all the skills in the world, and I really do believe this, and great character, and even great character for your company, but if they're not committed to the job, it will not work out. Like it really won't. This is so important. If this is your red flag, do not hire this person. Do not let this be your red flag. So let's talk about how do we assess commitment and how do we sniff out the red flags? So what does commitment actually mean? That might be a silly question, but I think it's really important to define. Commitment means being dedicated to this thing. Remember at the start of the speech, people care about your business as much as you. Now you're not going to expect that on day one, like loyalty and buy-in, all of those things are earned and you have to prove yourself as a leader over time, but do they have a desire to be committed to this thing? And what does that mean? It means restricting other things, usually, to have this thing. And so it depends. There are different levels of commitment based off what you need. So it's really important for you to know, okay, what type of commitment level do I actually need? Both inside of my company, like what does my company culture look like, and inside of this role. And in terms of like commitment within companies, every team or company in here, it'll look different. And we look at our competitors and I look at people ahead of us and I'm like, okay, well, we don't have the same company culture as them, right? They don't need that insane level of commitment. Ours looks like this, but ours also does not look like this. And I'm really clear on what ours looks like. If you just look at like acquisition.com as an example, they have a headquarters, everyone must relocate, and they're expecting most of their people to be there in their seats in their office by 6 a.m. Your commitment might not look like that. Our commitment doesn't really look like that, right? But like get clear on like, okay, what does this look like? Have a standard around it. Is it cool that, people have personal appointments and they're not being able to do things in the middle of the day? Maybe that's perfectly cool and perfectly fine, but just like have clear criteria of like, what does commitment actually look like? So you must know what you need for your company and for the role, because not all roles are going to be created equal either. Different roles require different levels of commitment. And the potential for a different role requires a different level of commitment. And so right now we're talking about recruiting and hiring for this person, and I never like to, on day one, assume someone's whole career. Someone asked me on open office hour call the other day, they're like, I'm between these 2 assistant coaches, but I could see this one attracting leads into the business, being on our ads, all of these things. I'm like, you haven't even hired this person yet, right? Don't map out their next 4 years within their company. We'll talk about that once they're in the door. Hire for the job at hand. However, once someone is in your company and we're talking about retaining them, growing them, and finding out their goals, then different levels of commitment are required, and that's what we'll talk about next. So you decide, okay, here's the commitment, here's what it looks like, I'm super, super clear on this. Now I must interview for it. I must ask questions to make sure that they are bought in to this level of commitment and we are on the same page. So if you have a high level of commitment and this is a full-time job, the person has 3 side hustles, might not work out. It might, but it might not. So you want to ask questions around this, right? And you want to ask questions around this without being attached to them saying, I'll give it all up and come into your company, right? Because they're their goals, and these are your goals, and these are your company goals. So ask really just like unbiased questions around their 1-year goal, their 3-year goal, their 5-year goal. And it doesn't matter if they're like, I really want to just like start my own business. In a year, I hope to be here. Cool, awesome, that's an honest answer. And this person's commitment probably doesn't fit with the commitment that I'm looking for on this path. So ask questions, don't be attached. And the best way to ask questions is just asking them about their goals, where they see themselves. You might also think through this a little more than asking the direct question, but if you're looking for a certain commitment level, especially if it's like, all right, this is full time, this person needs to be ride or die, they're an assistant coach, I want them to have 60 clients, I know this is the criteria and this is what this looks like. What phase of life is this person in? If they're a 38-year-old mom with a 4-year-old and a 5-year-old and they're like, I want to work 4 hours a day, I want to be involved in all the sports, I want to do all the things, might not work for the role, and that's perfectly okay. They could be a great person for another role, but you know your criteria, but don't assume ask, right? They are in charge of their life and their schedule. Ask questions around what they want their commitment to look like. All right, so just kind of some additional tips when we're thinking about bringing people into the company, recruiting for the first time. The red flag test. Like I said, one of the biggest mistakes I see people make is ignoring red flags. But just like when you enter a relationship, you're not like, man, there's this red flag, but I'm just gonna like bypass it. You're just not sure. You're like, maybe not, I don't know. And so we need a litmus test for those types of things. Ask yourself this question. If this person were to be fired in 60 days, what would be the reason? If you're like this, that's a red flag. If you have an immediate, it's gonna be this thing, then you need to formulate some more questions around that thing. You need to know for certain, okay, that's not gonna happen. I feel really reassured by their past behavior, those things. You cannot bring someone on the team when you're like, man, you know what? I have a feeling it's gonna be this, because that's what's gonna happen. And then I've talked about this ad nauseum at this point, but just putting a lot in time of thought into your interview questions. You have to know why you're asking the questions that you're asking. IFCA gives you so many resources. We give you interview questions. I'll share all my interview questions with you guys. I'm happy to. But my interview questions might not be your interview questions. If you ask a question and you have no idea what type of answer you're looking to get from it, everything's gonna sound great, right? Because they're gonna make it sound great. So, okay, I'm asking this question to see if they respond in a way that, they have empathy, they have authentic connections. So just put a lot of time and energy and effort into those questions. And then framing the interview. So from the start of the interview, you want people to show up and be relaxed. If you can achieve, okay, hey, it feels like this isn't even an interview, just like two friends having a conversation, it's conversational. You seem like a very approachable person, then that's awesome, because they're more likely to be honest, be their real self. So one of the ways I like to do this is I hop on and I'm just kind of informal at first. I might just be gathering some, hey, just give me 1 second. Let me just get my water or whatever. And then I sit down, I'm kind of relaxed. I'm not all buttoned up, ready to go. I'm being myself to allow them to kind of posture and be themselves. And I'll ask a really casual question and then I'll lead in and I'll say, hey, just so you know, at IFCA, we're pretty laid back. We have a team that has a great time. We have a great company culture, and everyone is really, really themselves. We're not corporate-y. And if you're like corporate-y or professional on this interview, you might not fit in with us. So like just permission to totally be yourself and be completely honest. This might not even feel like an interview, which I just say that, but I'm definitely going through like a very strict interview process. I'm like, shouldn't even feel like an interview. I haven't done like 4 hours of research and like thought about this for 3 years. It really won't even feel like an interview, so be yourself. And then I like to start by talking a little bit, loosening up the nerves, and I try to be extremely humble. However, being humble does not mean diminishing like success in your company or downplaying anything, because it's a two-way street and you're still trying to like sell this person. So I will, sell the person a little bit on the opportunity while being very humble, and I'll do it through a story, and in that story I'll like make fun of Jordan a little bit, or just do something to make them be like, oh, I like this person. Because as they're interviewing, they're not doing this. They're gonna pick the company that they like the most, like the mistake we've made in the past. So I want them to like me. And so I'll share all of that. And then I'll start with a couple like lighter type questions. But then my third or fourth, or maybe fifth, depending on how loose the person is, question is a really heavy hitter question. I usually go with, what's the hardest thing you've ever been through in your life? And I don't give any context. And then I say, and this is very vulnerable of me to ask. And so I want to ask you to answer this without me sharing. So I'll go first. And so I humble myself even more, and I bring myself like really to a level of vulnerability, and I'm like sharing personal shit about my life. Some people disagree with this approach, but I really feel like I get much better outcomes and answers when I just like put myself right on a level with the person and they stop putting me on a pedestal. So I share, and I'll share usually the hardest thing I've ever been through in my entire life. And they're like, damn, okay, we're just having a conversation. And then after that, usually comes all of my like more tactical questions, all of my, hey, tell me a story, all of these things, because they're just so much looser, and they're like, I feel really comfortable with you. And I do think that part's extremely important, to just get them to be like, okay, settled in, I'm being honest, I'm telling the truth now. I'm not gonna lie to this person who literally just told me a story about like, their dad dying, the birth of their son. Like they feel like we're friends now. So pulling this all together, I throw a lot at you. I want you to have a really tangible way to think about it. And so don't write this stuff down. Don't take notes on this stuff. This is just my own personal example of what I want you guys to do. So when you're hiring for a role, make a rubric. Take your criteria. Like I told you, the 5 core things, those are your competency things. You might have you should have a line item in there about commitment. Mine says buy-in. And then you should have some soft skills and character around this role. So this has a lot of things on it. You might not need this many things. I would say though, you probably need, I don't know, in the range of like 8 to 12, or that's probably good enough to know like, okay, for this role, this is what I'm looking for. And this is the clarity on what you need. And then this is how you form your interview questions. And so then over here to the right, what I do is I take every single applicant and I grade them on each of these things. And if you want to realize how bad you are at interviewing and asking questions to get to the bottom of it, start doing this. Because for my last hire, I had to interview the same person 4 times before I could put a grade in each of the columns. Because I would get off the call and I'd go, oh man, I really liked him. It was great. And I'd be like, what are his lead management skills? I don't know. Didn't even ask any questions about that. Or the questions that I did ask, I didn't really get good answers. I didn't get past experience. So back to the drawing board. Let me think. What do I need to ask to know what I need to know? And I would create a bunch more questions. It became like a funny joke by the end, like where I was like, okay, interview number 4. Are you ready to be interrogated some more? We had really good rapport by that point, but I was like, I'm dead serious, and I still have some questions in my mind. And he's like, of course you do. But it takes a minute to get very crystal clear on like, all right, does this person have this or do they not have it? And you might not nail it on the first time. And it's not a bad thing to interview someone a second, third, fourth time, because they look at this and they're like, all right, well, they're taking this seriously. This is a great opportunity. They're pulling back a little bit. It only makes them want to join your company more. All right, so good on that. Or bringing people into the company, recruiting, hiring, interviewing, any open loops, anything super confusing before I go into retaining? We can have some time for questions at the end too. Cool. All right. So now let's talk about, all right, did that part, or I have done that part in the past, and I have some great people on my team. Let's talk about retaining them. First thing, when it comes to retaining people, growing people. How do you grow your people? 4 things. Don't just talk about it, demonstrate it. You have to be the example of growth. Anchoring to their goal, I'll elaborate on what that means. People don't grow by accident. We'll talk about that, but they need a plan. And creating a culture of growth. So, don't talk about it, demonstrate it. There's this quote that I love by John Maxwell, and it's leadership is caught, not taught. I promise. You can read tons of leadership books, and you can stand in front of your new hire and be like, let me just teach you about how to be a leader. That's not how people learn how to be a leader. People learn how to be a leader by watching you be a really great leader. So in order to teach it, you first have to do it. And there's been so many times where I'm leading our sales team and I'm doing call reviews or I'm talking to them about a situation or something, and I'm like, oh yeah, do it like this, do it like this. I'm playing armchair quarterback. And I'm like, I know I've said this to this person 4 or 5 times, and for something about my teaching isn't landing. And so nothing has ever been more impactful than just saying, you know what, when's your follow-up with this person? Let me hop on. And then I hop on, and then I demonstrate it, and they're like, oh, okay. So leadership is taught, not caught, or caught, not taught. You can do this inside of your company, right? Like if an assistant coach is really struggling with like a mindset breakthrough with a client, you can sit back, I would do this, I would say this, have you tried doing this, have you tried doing that? Or you can say, let's just hop on a 3-way call, let me help them, right? They're gonna sit back, they're gonna watch how you handle it, they're gonna get so much more out of it. There are, big examples of this, there are small examples of this. A very small example is like, are you like, if you're upset about people being a minute late here, there, 10 minutes late, not prioritizing a meeting, well, are you like 2 to 3 minutes early for every single meeting? Are you like really showing the example of what it looks like? Big example, like how do you give feedback to people, right? If you're like this person, they don't know how to communicate, they don't come to you when something's wrong, how are you giving them feedback? What I've noticed is with some people on my team, I'm a lot better at giving certain people feedback than other people feedback, because you just have like different relationships with different people, and you can think, well, this they're good, they really never do anything wrong, and so like they don't get a lot of feedback from me. And then I've watched those people struggle to give feedback because they haven't really had a model of it. I'm like, oh, okay, whether they need it for themselves or not, if they're becoming a leader, they need a model of what it looks like. So let me look for areas and opportunity to give them feedback. I already shared this with you. I will say, inside of our own company, a couple of just like really incredible examples of leadership being caught, not taught. Shelly, who is our director of operations, she's been with the company for 4 years. And some of this, it really does just take time and proximity to grow and develop leaders. She's been with our company for 4 years, and she's seen me do everything because she started as like a part-time VA and then an EA, and she's like in my email inbox. She's in everything. She's seen me do everything, like very small decisions to like, how do I come up with a compensation structure for this team member? How do I handle an unhappy client, this or that. She's caught so much of it that she just does things now that blow my mind. I'm like, how do you know that? Like that was stolen directly from my brain. She's like, it was stolen directly from your brain. I've seen you do it so many times. So just like showing up is enough, but showing up and then, also explaining and trusting the person and bringing them right along there for the ride. Same thing with Corey. There's been so many times where Corey creates a framework for you guys. And I'm like, oh, like, did we like read the same book or whatever? And he's like, I just heard you or Jordan say it on an open office hour call, so I just like took it and then started teaching. And I'm like, that's incredible. That's amazing. So the thing is too, what I will say is with things like that, well, now I'll touch on that in a minute. Let's go into anchoring to their goal. So if you want to help someone grow, they grow in their own self-interest. They're not going to grow because you want your company to grow, right? Like people grow for their own reasons, their own motivating factors. And so you have to be able to anchor what this person wants to the goal that they want. But first, you have to know what their goal is. And a lot of times, like just the best way to think about this is, all right, as their leader, I become the feedback mechanism to their goal. So I need to know their goal. What does their income goal look like? What does their role growth or ambition in the company look like, right? What do they want? And a lot of times I see this part being skipped. And so when we're anchoring to get them somewhere, we anchor to a negative thing rather than a positive thing. And all you have to do is screw that up once and they're like, nope, never trying again. It's not worth it, I'm not doing that. What do I mean? Well, I like Shelly as an example because she works in really close proximity to me and has a career path, and she wants to be our COO. And so I'm often reminding her, hey, in order to really show up as a COO, you crushed it, but to get you to that next level, it's like do this, this, and this, right? Rather than, hey, you showed up here and you were really a perfectionist and it took way too long. Sometimes we give feedback in that direction, they're just like, okay, well, I'm screwing everything up, rather than empowering them to get to the next place. So anchor to their goal whenever giving feedback. A lot of times where people stumble though is, well, this person doesn't even know their goal. I've asked, right? And like either they don't know or they're giving me answers that kind of don't make sense. They just want to make more money. Okay, well, you can't write down make more money as a goal. That's not a goal. Or they want, they're just not sure. So what do we do in that instance? Do not choose for them. This is often, I've made this mistake. Well, they don't know, and what would be a great career path for them is they could become my head coach, or they're so, good on camera, they could be the person on my ads, or they could do this, or they could do that. If that's not their goal, then it's not their goal. That is serving your own interest, right? It's gotta come from them. So how do you do this? You ask questions, right? You just keep asking questions until you help them figure it out. Are they interested in leadership? Do they want to be a great leader? Hey, some people don't want to manage people at all. They don't want to be an head coach. They just think, oh, that's the next step and I should do that. So start asking questions through that. Do they want to be a great mom? Is more of their focus not in their professional life right now, and it's in their personal life? Again, don't steer towards an outcome that you want. What do they want? Because there might still be alignment there where you can help them get what they want while the company's getting what it wants, right? Do they want to make a lot more money? Do they want to start their own business? Again, these are not your goals. These are their goals. Do they want to be a head coach? What does that look like? And so I realized once, when we had T4E, the online fitness coaching company, I had an assistant coach. Again, this was another brilliant RD, and her character was there too. She was great. But I just realized things were starting to be off. We started to have little, just conversations, and I'm like, it doesn't feel like she wants to be here. It doesn't feel like we want the same things, but it was never direct communication. And I said, I need to figure out what her goals are. But at that point, the relationship had gotten kind of weird between her and I'm like, I don't know how to get her to be real with me, because I feel like she wants to leave, but I just want honesty around her goals. So I had another leader on our team do it and take her through this process of goal setting and ask about her 1 year, 3 year, 5 year goals. I formulated a lot of questions around our core values and then where she thought she was with that core value, where she wanted to be. And she was just the look on her face was this is the stupidest thing I've ever done in my life. I don't want to answer these questions. And so the other leader was like, hey, forget about T4E for a minute. Forget about why we're here. I want to know what you want to do. And so then she lit up and she started talking about how she wanted to open a clinic and wanted to do these things, a lot of things that didn't have anything to do with our company. And at that point I was like, awesome, okay, cool. There will become a point, a fork in the road, where we are going our separate ways because her vision just does not fit inside of our vision, right? We asked a bunch of questions and her answer was essentially, no, but I'm trying to be nice. And you don't want people who are just trying to be nice and trying to do the things that make you happy, right? We want a team of A players who are like, man, through this vehicle, I am meeting my goals. And that's what we're trying to learn and understand. So don't be attached to that. Figuring that out in that way, and I've done it wrong before too, but figuring out in that way allowed us to go, cool, let's figure out a phase out plan. This can be great, amicable, do it in a good way. What makes sense for you? What makes sense for the company? And we had a 6 to 8 month phase out in a way that made a lot of sense. She went on, she was able to thrive. We were able to replace her role with someone else who had more vision inside of the company. So when they also don't know their goal, your job is not to say, hey, here's a goal, here's a goal, here's a goal, but you can give them options of paths, right? So assistant coach, they've been there for 2 years. I'm getting tired of coaching clients. I just feel bored. I just feel stagnant. Sometimes they're not even that direct. They're just like acting in their behavior that like they kind of like hate their job now, and you're just like, what's going on? And so you can tell, all right, this person is like itching for some growth. Here are the paths, here are the options. And so for that assistant coach example, you can explain to them, look, you can be a rock star, you can be a superstar. Neither is better than the other, it's just like the ways that you can go. What does a rock star do? A rock star becomes just like a really, really great coach. So we can double down on the skills that you have, maybe some continued education. We're attracting this type of client who has this type of problem. We really don't have anyone who can solve that type of problem. Are you interested in that type of problem? Are you trying to learn more about this skill set? Or you could be the superstar. The superstar is like the climbing the corporate ladder type person. Are you interested in leadership? Do you like managing people? Do you like conflict resolution? Okay, like, these are the paths, and those what the paths look like. Here are the pros and cons of these. Here are the pros and cons of these. Which do you think fit within your skill set? What do you like? And then give them feedback on what they choose, right? So they might say one or the other, and then, you can share, based off what I know about you, you do understand that this job, you'll be doing X, Y, Z. Does that align with where you see yourself, where you want to go? I had someone on our sales team who really wanted to be our sales manager. And what I knew about her was she also really, really loved freedom and flexibility, and she only wanted to work like 30 hours a week. She's in a setter position right now, and there's a different path that kind of allows her to do that. So we just got really clear on like, all right, how much money do you want to make? What do you want your freedom and flexibility to look like? And I know that you're saying you want this thing, but I think you're going to hate that thing based off what you're telling me you want your life to look like and the freedom and flexibility that you have. So here's this alternative path that we could take that I think actually aligns a lot more with the things that you're telling me. And I kind of map what that would look like for her. And she's like, that sounds way better. I was just kind of thinking I had to like do the next thing ahead. And yeah, you would get there and you would hate that. So thinking about it as like you become the GPS to their goal, right? They're like, I want to do this. And you're like, okay, well, here's a fast way you can get there. Or, ooh, it's like, it's not good over there for you. This is what that looks like over there. What about like, what if we rerouted over here and did this thing? All right, people don't grow by accident. People need a plan. Shouldn't be any surprise there. Growth is done through action, not just knowledge. They can't just do a bunch of continued education to get there. You have to put people in situations that actually allow them to grow. So oftentimes we know how we've grown, and we're like, well, I put myself in this tricky situation and it was terrible and I had to build the resilience it needs. With our team, we're like, okay, here's a course you can go take to learn more about that thing. No, just like give them the task, give them the challenge. Be willing to put them in situations that you've been willing to put yourself in. That's how you help people grow. And you do not always need to shield your team from the pain of growth. Or from the pain of, is that what it says? That makes no fucking sense. From the pain of growth. What am I trying to say? Don't shield your team. Yeah, from the pain so that they can grow, whatever. There are certain things as a leader, as a CEO, that you have context to that's like, okay, I can't share this problem because they don't have the couple of years of context or whatever. And so in that case, yeah, you take an arrow to your back and you're just like, I have to deal with this. But when somebody wants to grow, whether that's into a new position, into like a new version of themselves, whatever, they need a little bit of pain. They need to understand, like they are going to go through some of the growing pains, and you have to allow that to happen. So what does that look like? Well, if someone's an assistant coach, they want to be a head coach, and you're the one doing majority of conflict resolution with unhappy clients, well, if they want to be like, the director of that department, that's going to be a part of their role. Let them start doing it. Hey, so-and-so is upset. You want to talk to them? Do you want help talking to them? Do you want me to help you frame the conversation? It's going to be uncomfortable. And usually they're like, yeah, I can do it. I'm just nervous. I'm like, yeah, you can totally do it. Should be nervous. It gets better. That's how you work through these things. And you only have to do that a couple of times, and then eventually they're like, ooh, I get it now. Like, I was scared, I stepped up to the plate, I did the thing, I'm growing, I feel like a different person, which gets them feeling closer to what they want, the head coach, the COO, whatever it is. And so recently, Shelly is gonna have to listen to this recording because I'm bragging on her a lot, but recently, Shelly came to me, who I said has ambitions to be our COO, and we were working through Christmas bonuses, which we do every year for our team. And she said, hey, I know how you think. I know performance within the company. I understand everyone's tenure. I know how you put all this together. She's like, let me put it together. Let me decide on Christmas bonuses. And of course, you'll like do an overview and everything, but just like, let me do that. Let me take that off your plate. And I wouldn't even have thought to give it to her because I just felt like I couldn't. And I was like, you know what? That's exactly what COO would do. Just like, let me check the box and say that's a good idea. She took it away, she did it. I changed like 2 things. She was 90% of the way there, which gives someone so much confidence when you're like, hey, this thing that I always deal with and that I always like, spend a lot of time on, or is even still sometimes uncomfortable with me, you try. It's incredible how people like who are meant to do it actually step up. All right, so growth look like, and like I said, people, they don't just grow by accident. You can't be like, okay, cool, I understand your goal is X, so, do these couple of things and like, see ya on your way. Like, it just doesn't really work like that. Like, they really do need a plan. What does it look like? Paint the vision for them. Because here's the thing. If people don't know where they're going, they will keep themselves stuck, usually for job security. You guys have all done this. I've heard it many times where I'm like, okay, so hire a setter. Well, I'm the one doing all the setting. What am I gonna do? How am I gonna be important? What am I gonna do in my business, right? It's even scarier for them because if you're like, okay, take these couple of things off of your plate, they're like, for what? Why? Are you gonna fire me? What's going on, right? So they really need to know where they're going. And like, you just kind of explain that. Here's what the day-to-day will look like. Here's what you'll manage. Here's what you'll do. We'll get more into that in a second. Share what has to happen for them to actually reach that vision. And then encourage and coach them along the way. So painting the vision for them. Like I said, if people do not have a clear vision for their growth, they will stunt their growth. They're gonna be worried about, being replaced. And then what has to happen for them to reach that vision? What skills do they have to learn? Here's a big mistake that I've made and I see people make. It's like, okay, here's where you're going, and then it's kind of just left like ambiguous to like what they need to do to get there. And the assumption is, okay, just time. And so have you ever had someone come to you, they're like, I've been here for X amount of time, so I should get X opportunity. No, that's not how this works. But if we don't define, hey, okay, you want this, the skill gaps that you have are this, this, and this. So what I need to see happen are this, this, and this improve. And then you like kind of show them how to improve them and stuff. And if that doesn't happen, they don't get that job. Just because you never promised it, you said this is a potential in a place that you could go. This is what your career trajectory could look like. But you've got to get there. You've got to earn it. And so a way to really do that is, if you are clear on the next opportunity, you might be sitting here thinking, I don't know what the job role of an assistant coach or a head coach looks like, or this looks like. We can help you with that. But you want to get really clear on like, okay, what is this thing that I'm even like, this vision for this person that I even have, right? Don't throw together an ambiguous thing where they're like, they could attract leads and they can be on the ads and they could do this. Like, okay, well, what are you actually asking them to do? Because if you don't know, how do you know if they have the skills? Go through the job description. Rate them where they're at right now. I've done this with several team members who are like, oh, I want to do this thing. And I'm like, I'll be honest. Here's where you really lack skills. And I love you. I love that you've worked here for 3 years and all the loyalty to the company and all that, but that's just not how we operate. Have these people from the outside who, here's where they rank. I've been able to show my rubric. You're a 4 here, they're an 8 here. Doesn't mean you can't become an 8 or a 9, but this is the specific thing we need to work on to get you there. And so go through the job description. They want this role, they want this growth, it's up to them to get it. What's a red, what's a yellow, what's a green? That's just like a simple way to do it, or you can do 1 through 10, either way, I've done both. Green is like you crush it with this, and I can see a lot of potential for you growing into this. Yellow is like, it's kind of untested, I don't really know, so I'll start putting you in some situations where I just throw things at you and we'll see. Red is, this is a skill that is absolutely gonna hold you back from being, ever being this, so we'll work through these things together. take the red, give them 2 or 3 things, and then start testing them, right? People learn through action, not through continued education. So I wouldn't be like, all right, so now go take this course and go do this thing. Like maybe if they need some real like context and stuff, sure, put them through it, or you teach them, but start putting them in situations because they will figure it out. I mean, how have you figured out everything in your business? Just like fucking doing it. You're like, well, I found myself here, and so now I guess I have to work through this thing. That's how they're gonna do it too. So encouraging them and coaching them along the way. Just like fitness coaching clients, you can't go, here's your plan, talk to you in 90 days, hope you reach your goals, right? They need coaching along the way. And so coaching on the encouraging and positive side and coaching on the constructive side. So, you see them do something, crush it, super simple. Sometimes we just overthink feedback and encouragement for our team. It can be as easy as like, hey, that was freaking awesome. If you would have done that 2 months ago, I know how you would have reacted. You would have been so nervous. You would have came to me. I didn't even hear from you, and you crushed it. That was so great. Just like very simple things, encouraging them along the way. Because they're gonna have moments where they really need it. And then when opportunities come up to get constructive feedback, do not let your own discomfort win. That does not make you a good leader. If you hit that little crossroads where you're like, I'm seeing them do this thing, and it's not good, and you're like, but I don't know how to have the conversation, I don't know how to formulate it, you absolutely have to have it, right? Otherwise you're not being the leader. So, and sometimes we just need examples of it. Using Shelly as an example, one of Shelly's biggest skill deficits between where she is and where she needs to be is just some of the financial literacy within the company. She's really never been on the back end of the financial stuff, and a COO would, and they would come to me and they would share stuff with me, and then I would make decisions. And so she just had a real gap there, and very thankful to Steve, who gave her a plan. Steve is like mentoring her to help her become the COO, gave her a plan, put together this executive report for Aaron and Jordan. It needs to have these things in it, and kind of coached her along the way. So she put together this executive report for the first month, and she's like, it took me 8 hours. And I looked at it, and I'm like, this would have taken me 30 minutes. And so I'm like, it's not that means she's bad at this or anything, but like, what's the skill gap here? And so I said, talk to me. Why did this take 8 hours? And she starts talking through it. And what I found is she needs some help on the financial literacy and like data digging and knowing where to find stuff. And the other thing that I already told her was a skill deficit of hers is she just let her extreme perfectionist tendencies get in the way. And so I was able to go like, look, this is what's important, this is what's not important. As the COO, anchored to her goal, you're gonna have to let some of these small details and some of these balls drop. You're just gonna have to get used to that. And she's like inbox zero, check every message, check every box, extremely detail-oriented type of person. I'm like, I don't know that carries you into your next phase. COO, you need to be able to recognize these balls can drop, these balls can't drop. And just through that feedback, she was able to speed that up, because I'm like, look, we're at a place where it's not worth it for you to replace 8 hours of your time to save me 30 minutes of my time. So we have to speed this process up. And it was a great conversation, great feedback, and she got a lot better. All right, lastly, creating a culture of growth. So reward imperfect action instead of punishing mistakes. And this is so hard, because sometimes as a business owner, like our team members do things that you're just like, what in the fuck were you thinking? Like, what? Like, I know we talked about this. Like, why'd you do that? Sometimes they're costly mistakes too, you know? But the thing is, we've all made costly mistakes in our business. Difference is, we're control freaks. Anyone who chooses to run a business and be an entrepreneur is a control freak. So you feel like, well, I would much rather fuck it up myself than let someone else fuck it up. And it just hurts more when they do it. You have to give them the same chance. You have to give them the same fair fighting chance. So sometimes what it means is just allowing yourself a minute to cool off. Like you watch an upsell call from an assistant coach, or you watch a sales call from a closer, and you're just like, what? Like, we have trained on this, we have talked about this. They literally just said, "Hey, let me know if you want to sign up." Like, are you joking? And like, you just, your blood boils, and you're just like, you create a whole story. They don't care about the business the way I care about the blah, 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 blah. And you just have to allow yourself to cool off for a moment. And then You come to them and you have to reward imperfect action rather than punishing a mistake. Now, I'm not saying every time, right? If this is like the 17th time this has happened, don't go to them and be like, hey, you did a good job trying, right? But let's say it's the first time and you feel like, man, I prepped this person so well. I've watched so many of their, I've done so many mocks with them. They've watched so many of my calls. Like, they're ready, they're doing great, and they just bomb it. Well, you do not want to punish them, right? What you want to do is go to them, put yourself in their shoes. You remember your first sales call. You remember your first upsell call. You remember how terrified you were. They're probably even more scared, right? Because it's like they're trying to like make sure you're happy and all these things. It's not just their ass on the line. You know, it's a different dynamic. And so the first words out of your mouth should be like, hey, I'm so proud of you for trying. I know you were scared, right? So we're rewarding the imperfect action. And then in the future, to just make up this skill gap, what we're gonna do is X, Y, Z, come up with a plan. That plan should be, I'm gonna be on that call with you, and I'm gonna help you, and I'm gonna hop in where I need to hop in, and then you're gonna show them so that leadership is caught, not taught, right? So they feel like, man, I really screwed up. You're not gonna be like, that was awesome, right? You're gonna point out where they screwed up. You're gonna reward the imperfect action. You're gonna reward the mistake. Hey, you crushed it. And you know, that one thing you said was totally off script. Like it took, you know, a little bit of courage to say that. This is great. I know this was so hard for you. And in the future, here's how we improve on this skill gap. If you want a culture of growth, there are going to be growing pains. You've already felt your own growing pains, right? We're just so much more tolerant, I think, of our own mistakes. You're like, well, this is mine. If anyone screws it up, I'd rather screw it up. You have to have the same type of tolerance for your team. You have to allow them to make mistakes. You have to allow them to waste money. You have to allow them to, you know, stumble and fall. And then you even have to like say, hey, good job. Good job failing, because that is what we do here. Let's see, I know I'm running a little bit over. I'm almost done. Make your challenge someone else's opportunity. So as a business owner, you have moments where you have a decision to make. You can say, all right, I'm overloaded here. My options are either A, let this ball drop or push this deadline, or B, ask someone for help. Choose B. If you have made the right hires on your team and you have people there who want to grow, ask them to step up to the plate. Even if you're like, I have no idea how they would do this. Like it's all in my brain. I don't know how they would do it. That's how I felt with the Christmas bonus thing. I never would have asked. Shelly stepped up to the plate and literally asked me. Just ask, hey, I have, especially if like you frame it in a way that like, I really need help. I had a personal emergency come up. I had this thing happen. Choose B. Funny enough, I wanted to insert a personal story here of a time I've done this and I could not think of one. So this is my area of growth as an entrepreneur. I so often am like, oh, I'll just push my deadline back or whatever. Ask for help. You've heard us say this before, businesses that grow the fastest are the ones who make the least mistakes. You've heard us share the John Wooden quote, the team that makes the most mistakes wins. Yes, but only if you're really learning from those mistakes, right? So create the culture of growth by allowing your team to make mistakes, feel good about making mistakes, feel really good about making decisions. And then on the backside of it, you know, don't just be like, that was awesome, good call, right? Encourage the action and then help them. Help them in the future. This is like the skill gap deficiency. This is how we can get 10% better. Encourage them along the way. And that's all I've got for you guys.
Hey, give it up for her.